Mark, an alcoholic.
Hey, Mark.
I think 48 years is ludicrous. How in the hell am I this old? That's the part that bothers me. If I need to speak, get closer, whatever you guys will tell me. I've been thinking about this pretty much all week, and so I wrote a bunch of notes down today. We'll see what happens. Some people are interested in the demographic stuff. I was the fourth of 4 children. There was no alcohol in my house. I don't think I ever saw my father drink, although he said he did before I was born or something. I lived most of the first 6 years of my life with my uncle, who was the only guy I thought that gave a crap about me, and later found out he was drinking a 5th of whiskey a day. So I know where it came from. I think it's really important in recovery, and I read a lot of literature, so I'll start getting off track here at some point, that you know where you came from and how it happened. And I don't know, I'm not going to say the steps don't do that, but the steps are at least part of the process. It's almost important for emotional intelligence that you can say, this is how I got here. And that's a lot of work. The people that seem to do well in this program are the ones really well into work. It's a lot of reading, a lot of writing, and a lot of talking to people outside the meetings, which the statement I've made before is every significant change I've made in my life has come due to a conversation with someone probably in the program. Something I wasn't aware of or something I didn't know how to deal with, and they would give me that little flash of light. Oh, damn, that's simple. A couple of times it's been people outside the program, but those people I had 20 and 30-year relationships with, so I think it was close to the same thing. I'll give you a little history. When I was 20 years old, 7 days before my 21st birthday, I was in the United States Navy, and I was going to a school in Great Lakes, Illinois. And I really didn't want to go back to the ship I came from, so I was frantically what do I have to do so I'd have to go back to that ship, because that's the worst ship in the Navy. That makes McHale's Navy look organized. Some people won't get some of my references, that's okay. And it was not a good ship to be on, and it was an ammunition ship, all this sort of stuff. So in the Navy, like every profession, in prison, you have these lawyers that know all the rules. So someone told me, if you get put into a 30-day hospital stay, they have to cut you new orders. You're not going to have to go back to your ship. And I'm thinking about Bonnie and Clyde. I got to shoot my damn toe off. What the hell do I have to do to get in the hospital for 30 days? Now, prior to that, I had been in the hospital for I think twice for a week at a time for pneumonia, but I didn't know how to create pneumonia, so that was off the table. And I'd have to do it 4 times. It didn't sound like fun. And this guy said, if you get sent over and you get accepted into that alcohol rehab center, that's 30 days. Light goes off. I'm 20 years old. I really don't have a drinking problem. And I'm thinking, what lies do I have to tell to get this guy or these people to let me into the treatment center? One of the themes that goes on in my story is always the people. The intake counselor was a guy named Harold Leviscante. Let me tell you a little bit about Harold. Harold drove an AMC Pacer. And Harold used and I always get this wrong, Chivas Regal felt, what do you call this? Chivas Regal used to come in this felt, bag? That's what he used for his lunch. Harold was also and I may get this wrong, defrocked priest. And because he was pushed out of that because of his drinking, he found out that he had at least a bachelor's in psychology. He may have had a master's, I never remember. But the Alcohol and Drug Center in Great Lakes, Illinois was looking for counselors, and so that was the first job he got. After do you call it a defrocking? Is that the term? Defrocked. He's been defrocked. I don't want to do half of that. I don't do the whole thing. So he was my intake counselor. And there's a few people in my life that when I meet them, I get this sense of I can't lie to them. And that was the first person I remember, other than my uncle who raised me. First person as an adult I remember, I have to tell him the truth. Don't remember all the questions. Some of them were like, how much do you drink? And I told him, and literally I drank maybe one day a week, like Friday night or Saturday night. How much do you drink on those nights? I go, well, how much you got? And I usually drank for two reasons, or I stopped drinking for two reasons. I ran out or I passed out. If one of those didn't happen, I'm still going. Now, I didn't know anything about drugs then, so I didn't know what drugs could keep me going all night, but luckily I didn't find that out. But he asked me questions like that, and I remember I don't remember if he was frustrated, but he was searching for something. And he said, have you ever had a blackout? What the hell's a blackout? I'd never heard that term. He said, do you ever, wake up the next morning and there's parts of the night before you can't recall? And I go, yeah, all of them. When I drink, that's the whole point. Is blotto, I think is what we called it back then. And he just looked up at me and he said, you're serious? I said, yes. And he wrote something on the paper and he said, go back to your barracks and get your gear. You're coming in. You're coming for a 30-day program. I was shocked because I thought I told him the truth. He wasn't going to let me in. I thought I had to make up all these lies about how bad of a drinker I was. And I just told him the truth. So that was fortunate. There was no reason for me to go. I hadn't had any consequences. I should have had, but I didn't have any DWIs. I never got a public drunk. I should have. I never lost a job because the Navy's not going to fire you for drinking. I found that one out a long time ago. And I'd never really destroyed anything with my drinking. I was just a heavy weekend drinker, and I just liked to drink. So Harold said, get your stuff. And I came back over, and I was happy as hell because I'm not going to have to go back to the USS Butte, the butthole of the Navy. And that ship has since been sunk, just so you'll know that's how bad it was. Unfortunately, both ships I've owned have both been sunk, so maybe I'm the common thing there. And it was Harold's group therapy. We didn't do a lot of education. He would sit around with us for about an hour, 3 or 4 times a day. And if I remember correctly, there was 6 or 7 or 8 of us in the room. And Harold, like I said, he had a degree in psychology, so he just loved asking these questions like, well, why do you think you're doing that? And that intrigued the holy hell out of me. I was all in. This is fun. And the main group I was with, for the 4 weeks I was there were 3 of us that came in about the same time. And we got to the point where it was almost, we were vying for Harold's attention. We wanted to be able to say something that would impress him. So whatever it took, whatever we had to divulge for him to give us his little nod or approving, and he always had his notebook, and so every now and then you'd say something, he'd start writing down, like, yeah, I got it. That must be important. So I was I don't know what the term people would call it now, but I was addicted to the group therapy. I enjoyed that. And that set me up really well for AA. Because when someone said you had to do a 4th step, I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's not that big of a deal. So when I left there, I went back to training. I was a gunner's mate, so I was doing my training. Left there and got assigned to another ship on the West Coast. Yay! It's another damn ammunition ship. Looks exactly like the one I left. So there's some fate in that. I went from USS AE 27 to USS AE 26. Same class of ship. But it worked out well. Then where I was stationed, Northern California, Concord Naval Weapons Station, that area of Vallejo. Sometimes we'd go down to Long Beach and places like that. And actually spent a little time in Earl, New Jersey. That's a great place to go. And I started looking for meetings. And what I didn't know is the Bay Area, and this was 1977, somewhere in there, there was no internet. There was no place you could go and get a list of all the meetings, but there was an 800 number. And you'd call the 800 number and say, I'm in El Cerrito, California, and I'm on East 14th. And they go, oh, there's a meeting right around the corner. So that was my introduction to finding meetings. So I would literally call wherever I happened to be, that 800 number, and say, is there a meeting? Yeah, there's one. And they, God, this will date me. Guess what I use to find the meetings? Thomas Brothers maps. Anybody remember those? There's this little book, and you'd put an address in there and say C7. So you go to page 7 and C and 13 and triangulate. That was good training for me. Later, I became a process server, so I learned really well how to use those. One of the meetings I got very fortunate to go to, and just found it by happenstance. It was a men's meeting only, and I don't remember what night of the week it was, in San Leandro, California. Or it could have been San Lorenzo. They're right next to each other. And it was in the back room of a man's house, and he was a jeweler. So he had probably $50,000 or $60,000 worth of jewelry in the room, and he would show you stuff. He goes, well, this is $7,000. Damn. But the thing that I remember about that meeting is all the men, okay, you remember, I'm 21 now, or so. All the men in that meeting are probably between 45 and 65. Real old people. As I say up here at 70 years of age. But to me, they were like these godlike creatures. Because they had 5, 10, 15, 20 years of sobriety. And I know I had to be obnoxious. I know my personality now. I know I just ragged on them and asked them question after question after question. And they were so patient. Kind of like, that's okay, grasshopper. We'll get to that next week. But they let me keep coming back. And I think one of them actually told me one time, you can come next time. Some of my memories from that are pretty distinct. There was one gentleman, I wish I could remember his name, but this is back when you could smoke inside, especially if it was your own house. But he had a silver dollar, or something the size of a silver dollar, and had a hole in it. And he would take his Pell Mell, or his Chesterfield Kings, and twist them through there. I think it was like packing this tobacco or something. But anytime it was his time to talk, he'd grab those. Before he'd say a word, it'd take like 30 seconds to do that. I thought that was so cool. So I wanted to try that, but I could never find that little thing. But the guys there, I would ask questions like, how do you know this is going to work? What's the point of doing this? And they would patiently answer my question. And I got so much from that. I'll forever be indebted. So some number of years later, after I'd moved away and came back, I tried to find that meeting. It didn't exist anymore. But that was a great meeting. After I got out of the Navy, I came back here to Jonesboro. So I had a year and a half, 2 years clean, something like that, sober. I'll say clean and sober interchangeably, so forgive me if that's verboten nowadays. But I had a little bit of time, and I came back, and AA was fairly thriving in Jonesboro. And just for the record, I'll tell you some of the names of the guys. There was a guy named Elmer M. I don't know if I can use their last name. They're all deceased. There's Elmer Mays. There was a guy named Bud Dice. Charles Allen. I don't remember Ken's last name, but somebody on the other side will know that she was married to him. And a few George Anderson. So those of you that know about George Anderson will know he was one of the wild cards in this bunch. And so when I moved here back to Arkansas, guess who I chose to be my sponsor? George Anderson. He was Looney Tunes. That's how bad I was. But we had fun. He later on he changed what he thought being sober meant. But in that time I was here, I think I lived here a little over a year before I moved to Wyoming. But Elmer was the one I remember the most. God, this will really age me. Elmer went to high school and graduated with my mother. My mother graduated high school in 1939. And Elmer knew my mother and he knew my family. And he could have easily said something to a lot of people and made my life miserable because I was going to AA. I never heard a word from anybody outside the program about that I was going. Never. And I was worried for a while because I was afraid my mother would hear or, whoever. It didn't matter. But it never, so that thing about anonymity and making sure you protect each other's anonymity, that was strictly top of the list for people, and I enjoyed that. There was a place where I think it was like not computer repair, but some sort of repair shop. Do you know what the repair shop was? Like copying machines or something? Ken B owned it anyway, but about 5 or 6 of the guys that were in the program worked there. So at 2 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, if you were just kind of like screaming and things weren't going real well, you could go to that copy machine place. And there's always a guy from the program behind the counter. Charles Allen was there. I remember him distinctly, and some of the other guys. But it was like, this was before the shed existed. And so that was our Alano Club, whatever you want to call it. But that's where we went. If you had to speak to someone or you just needed to be somewhere, you could go there. And you were never told where at work, get out of here. And I was going back to college, so I had plenty of times to go over there. So I left here. There was a guy in Al-Anon named Mike W. And we started, I don't remember how this all started, but at some point we were running the Spring River as a business. So we were canoeing, running the Spring River. We had a trailer and all this stuff. And we'd take groups up, paddle down the river, spend the night, and then bring them back the next day. And it was relatively lucrative. So Michael got this great idea. Maybe we should go to Jackson Hole, Wyoming and do this. I'm like, where the hell is Jackson Hole, Wyoming? So being the free spirit that I was, let's go. So I said, sure, I'll go. Had no idea where I was going, what was going on, but hell, I had 2 years sober. Let's do something special. We went up there and immediately found out there wasn't much AA up there. I think there was one person there that had 6 months or something like that. And then a little later, someone moved in and had a couple of years. But it was nice because I felt like I was an initial member of a meeting, so I felt some obligation to make sure things were done right. So I was forced to understand the traditions because I had to know what was going on. There's also, if you've ever been to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, it's one of the most beautiful places in the United States. So I enjoyed that there. We spent a year, and it took us a year to lose all our funds. We were broke at the end of the year. Canoe business in Jackson Hole, Wyoming is not going to work. If we were a raft business, maybe. And this was just a little close to 2 years after I had got out of the Navy. And someone in the program said, you were in the Navy. I told them the times, and they said, you need to go talk to this guy. So I went and talked to the guy. And I don't remember exactly who he worked for, but it was some government agency. And at the end of, you do a 6-year enlistment. I didn't know all this stuff till then. You do a 6-year enlistment, so I did 4 active and I did 2 years inactive. At the end of that 2 years, some of the funds that were available to me would dry up. And one of them was training. So instead of learning how to fly on the GI Bill, they had this class in Fort Lyons, Colorado, which was a alcohol and drug counselor training program. And it was 9 months. Now, had I not gone to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, I'd have never got to that. So that's why I just, some stuff, and people say, oh, this is horrible. You don't know. Do what seems right at the time. So I went there, and I did 6 months of in-house and then did a pre and a post internship. And the guy that ran it, this is one of those other guys, a guy named Lewis, Dr. Lewis Stevens. If I forget to say Lewis, he'll come back from the grave and kick my ass. He was a psychiatrist. And he ran that alcohol and drug counselor training program for the VA. And because I was veteran, that's how I got to go. There were some stipulations. You could not work while you were there. So you were in class from 8 to 5. And we studied the stuff we knew at that time. what was known about alcoholism, addiction. So it was fairly thorough. And the one thing I didn't enjoy it at the time, I enjoy it now. Once a week, a person from Toastmasters came in and you had to participate. If you've never been to Toastmasters, it's getting up and doing this shit. And having people, anybody noticed how many ums I've done so far? 2, so that's not bad. But somebody in the audience will be counting ums, and somebody be counting likes, somebody be counting your nose, and all sorts of stuff. And it was, to me, it was a challenge. I think to some people it was very intimidating. So we learned to do that. So in this 6 months I was there, Dr. Lewis Stevenson, who's one of these other guys that I knew I couldn't lie to, first week you were there, you had to do a 1-hour session with him. And I went in and I'm like, yeah, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And he said, you're fairly young, yeah? And I was 23, 24, whatever it was. And he said, next whatever day this was, when you come in to see me, I want you to write everything you can think about from birth to the 6th grade. Everything. Not just the highlights, not just the lowlights. Everything you can think of. He probably didn't think I was going to do it that way. Those little binders, I filled one of those up. I wrote everything I could remember. And once I started writing, it was like the floodgates came. Oh yeah, I remember this. Remember the time in the 3rd grade. Blah, blah, blah. Wrote it all down. This was a precursor to doing a really good 4th step. So that was the first week. The second week I did from 7th grade to 9th grade. And then, so went up. So it didn't take me long to get to today's date. But when it came time to do a serious 4th step, it was like, I've already done this. I still have the literature to show what I did. I'm very glad that happened that way. It wasn't, there was no fear, I'm not sure how moral it was. I still question certain words we use in here. I don't know what fearless and moral is, but I did one as best I could. And when I got through that, I had a sense of, now I understand why all these things happen in my life. Now I understand why I feel the way I feel when these certain things happen. Now, I'm not going to say I got everything all figured out, but I felt really comfortable. At that point, I've dealt with everything in my past that I know of. If other stuff comes up, I'll deal with it. And Dr. Lewis Stevenson was one of those guys that I would go in and I was like a little puppy. Yeah, here, and I wrote this. Here, yeah, and look, yeah, right here. Then, and in the 8th grade, this, and all that. And I thought this stuff was just so damn brilliant. And he would look at me and go, okay, settle down. Let's deal with this. Tell me about this part. And he would always focus on this stuff I thought was unimportant. Because he knew the parts that were important. I didn't. I was looking at the highlights about something I did, like, in the 5th grade I broke a guy's jaw. I thought that was a big deal. He goes, no one cares. Especially my sister. So that got me through. When we left there, I went and took a job as an alcohol and drug counselor in California. But at that point, I felt really, really good about recovery. When people were talking about doing the 4th and 5th step, I know what the hell that means. And I know what comes from it. So you didn't have to sell me that anymore. I moved out to a place, you may not know, Kings Beach, California. That was where I did my post-internship. And I got taught a couple of lessons there. The place I lived and the place I worked was 4 blocks from the Calneva Casino. And I didn't know I had a gambling problem. So I got to find out about that one real quick. And here's the thing, I'm cheap. And when I lost my whole damn paycheck one time, I said, something's got to give. We're not doing this crap again. So I didn't have to go down that rabbit hole for a long period of time because I knew what it was. I was sort of addicted to the adrenaline, the whole process, and this was exciting. And I said, that's dangerous for me. Because back then they would give you as many drinks as you could have while you were gambling. I said, I don't need to be around that. So I learned that one rather quick. I think I had one later foray into gambling, and I gave myself a certain amount of money to lose, and I was surprised how fast I lost it. And I said, it's not going to change. I could be wrong. Somewhere in the late 80s, they started doing the lottery in California, and I could be wrong exactly when. I have never, ever, ever, ever played the lottery in California or Arkansas. It's not something I feel comfortable doing. And when I see the ads, you can't win if you don't play, that's like a sucker's bet. So, I did spend a lot of time in California. And I won't bore you with a lot of stuff, but the thing that the program gave me, I was able to take a ton of chances out there. I don't know if this is true. I really don't. But I used to say I never graduated high school because I don't think I did. But those of you that know, I graduated in 1973. All the high school records were destroyed. So everyone graduated. There's a chance I missed a class or two. My senior year, I think I was probably under the influence of something probably a third of the time I was in school. This girl I went to high school with the other day, a few years ago, she said, "You were so nice to me in the 11th grade." And her name's Alicia. I'm like, "Alicia, what are you talking about?" This was all on Facebook or something. Said, "You were the sweetest thing to me when we were in 11th grade." And I go, "I don't remember her. I'm not being mean. It's not like she's not worth remembering, but I have no memory of her." She said, "Well, in the 11th grade, I broke my leg, and for the whole semester, you walked me from the science building to the main building, which is maybe a couple of 100 yards. I don't remember what it was." He said, "You were so sweet, and you carried my books, and you made sure I was okay." And I'm like, I really don't remember. So I assume I was an okay guy, but I don't remember parts of it. There's a guy, I can't say his name, he's not in our group. We sold advertisements for the school newspaper, and I love the fact that it was called the High Times, because I was high the whole time I was selling the ads for it. But we got to leave campus. So at 2:30 or whenever the last period starts, they would let us leave campus to go sell ads for the school newspaper. And they told us we had to sell X number of square inches or whatever the amounts were. And some of you may or may not remember there was a place called Midway Snooker Hall on around 200 South Church. Yeah. That's where I lived a lot of the time. And so if you went into the snooker hall at 2:30 in the afternoon, most of the businessmen of Jonesboro were in there. They'd be taking a little sniffer of alcohol and stuff. So in about an hour, I could sell all the ads I needed to sell for the entire semester, which meant I didn't have to go sell ads anymore. So me and Lloyd we had learned that his trunk, he had like an Electra 225, if I'm remembering correctly. So I think you could put about 8 bodies in the trunk. So we had a few coolers in there. And that's what we would do. At 2:30 we'd go out to sell ads and get fairly inebriated and then go to track practice. You can ask people that know me. My junior and senior year I high jumped, which white people don't do that real well, but I was okay at it. And what I would do is I would put the standards and put everything out, and then I'd go do one jump and land in the pit. And there was all this foam stuff, and I would just kind of nestle down in there. And about an hour later, I'd wake up. And the coach, I think, was intimidated by me because he would never come roust me, which is sad. I wish he would have, but maybe I'd have, doesn't really matter. But I was telling people, that I ran track. I think I lettered all 3 years in high school, and I don't have memories of a lot of the stuff. I was telling people the other day, my senior year, I had this memory that I had won the district back then. The schools were either AAA East or AAA West. Of course, we're AAA East. And I said, I won the AAA regional track meet in the high jump. And I started saying, oh shit, that's one of my old lies. Because, one of the things that I did really well was lie when I came in. And so when I moved back here, I went to the Jonesboro Public Library. And they have all the years, Jonesboro Sun on microfiche, I think going back to 1920 something. And so I went and looked, April of 1972, I don't remember the exact date. There it was, the results for the high jump, AAA. I won. I got so accustomed to lying, I didn't even know when I was telling the truth. Okay, so one thing I will tell you is in my recovery, there's a few things that have helped, specific people, talking to people. I toyed with it for some number of years. I used to go to Al-Anon. I went here for a few years, and I learned some really important things. Now, I'll tell you, I'm not going to give you an Al-Anon speech, but the stuff that they did a little differently, they talked about my goal is to have an ever deeper understanding of the 12 steps. And I thought that was just like, that should be in neon lights when you come in. That's something to strive for. And I've done a lot of work, various ways. One of the people in my past that I was very thankful for, you may not remember this, there was a book written in 72 or 74, I can't remember. It was called Born to Win. It was written by a woman named Muriel James. And for those that were around in those periods, that was the transactional analysis period. That's what everybody was doing for self-help. And she had written it, and she was doing a seminar near Kings Beach, California, so I went. And so I got firsthand knowledge of a lot of that stuff and just became totally mesmerized by that. So I studied that for many years. I wish it would come back so I could go get paid to do it again. But she was one of the types that when you met her, she almost intuitively knew what you needed. And I'd never seen someone like that before. And when we'd do these group sessions and a few individuals and stuff, and she would just say things, it's like, holy crap, how did I not see that? So that was one of the people that really helped me with some other stuff. Anyway, so Al-Anon talks about the way you make changes. It's called the 3 A's. I don't know if AA does this now or not, but the first A is awareness. If I don't practice a program and talk to people and read literature, I don't become aware of some of my, I'm going to interject this here, I don't call them character defects anymore. They're called character defenses. The things in my past that I did was protect me. So that's not a defect, right? It's not a bug, it's the way it's meant to be. That takes away the blame. When people say character defects, it always sounds to me like they're beating themselves up. I did things, my character defenses were so that I wouldn't get hurt or people couldn't take advantage of me. And there's nothing wrong with that. Today, I have to change those. They served their purpose when they were available. So today I don't have to do those. I can choose to do others. But the first is awareness. So that takes a lot of work, a lot of talking to people. I love reading literature at times because it seems like, the 112th time I read something is like, oh crap, that's what it was saying? I never got that. And the second A is acceptance. And some people say acceptance is the key. If I find a character defense that I have, the way I push people away or the way that I act like an asshole, no one ever calls me that, or I'm arrogant, then I need to change that. But I have to accept that's me. That's my behavior. Now, in the past, it served a purpose. It doesn't serve a purpose today. So I need to learn to change it. And the third is where I see a lot of people getting caught up is I have to have an action to change it. When people say, well, I'm just going to quit doing that, or I'm going to change the way I think, I'm like, no, you're not. I challenge you to change your thinking with your thinking. But you can behave to change your thinking. And that's one of the keys, I think, for me. I have to act in a way that thinking will come along. The other thing that I got from Al-Anon, I don't think I was a huge enabler. I don't think I was one of those people that went around and allowed people to do things that they shouldn't do. But what I did notice is there's times when I probably could have done something I would hesitate. Or I would get involved when I shouldn't have, when it wasn't healthy for me to do it. So the thing they taught me was love with detachment. I can still love people, I can still want best for them, but I don't have to be involved at the level that's unhealthy for me. So that love to detachment was a big deal. I got a whole bunch of notes on here I'm not going to do. Have I done a war story yet? Oh, good. I put on here no war stories. So, you may wrap it up in like 5 minutes? Is that okay? How long you want me to go? Well, no, you need to tell me, otherwise I'll keep going till like 9:30. So, the two things that I preach to people more about this program than anything, in our literature it says resentments are our number one offender. I told someone before the meeting, I only have one resentment left, and I'm not going to let go of it. And it's to Gerald Ford. Son of a bitch pardoned Richard Nixon. I'm not letting that go. I was just a few months clean when it happened, and I was incensed. How dare you? That sucker. That guy needs to go spend some time with you. If he did, we wouldn't have the problems we have today. Anyway, it's political shit. But I can feel that one. I can still feel that a little bit. He shouldn't have done that. He should have done, legally, supposed to go to jail for doing that shit. But resentments are one of those things that I didn't think I had a lot of resentments when I came in. Yeah, a few here and there. But like anything else in this program, if you start putting things on paper, it's like you open the spigot and it starts flowing. And it was like, oh, I forgot about that one. Oh, I forgot about that one. Oh, I forgot about that one. And so pretty soon I've got, like this whole page of just people that I have resentments against. One specifically still ate at me for some number of years. And I really didn't know how to get rid of it. Because I thought someone had done something really, really mean to me. And they had no reason to do it and I didn't deserve it. And when it finally got through to me that I'm not forgiving him for him, and I'm not forgetting him. I'm forgiving him for what action was done against me. And I separated it. And then it started making sense. I can't walk around anymore, other than Gerald Ford, pissed about shit in my past. I just can't do it. It eats at me. I have to forgive and let go of those resentments willingly. I can't do it begrudgingly, and I can't do it because somebody else told me I have to. So that takes a lot of work and a lot of writing and a lot of talking to people. There was a point where I don't think I was capable of telling you how much I hurt. I just didn't, either I didn't know how to tell it or I wasn't sure of it, but for whatever reason I would not get into that. And when I finally did, it was, again, the dam breaking. It's like, God, I'm holding all this stuff. The interesting part is, when I let go of all that stuff, I was like, I'm not sure I can stand up. I mean, it just took everything out of me. But that was a positive. I don't think I've seen anything that I've held recently in the last probably 10 or 15 years. I mean, stuff that bothers me now, if I have a resentment, I process it in a day or two or a week or a month, whatever it takes, and I know I'm going to eventually get to that point where I let it go. I just can't hold on to that stuff. It eats at me. The analogy I've heard is like shitting your pants so other people will have to smell it. That doesn't make sense. And that's kind of the way we did it. The other part is amends. And I make a big issue when people go to make amends. First I tell them stop. People want to make amends way too early. And what they think amends are is I'm going to go tell all these people I've hurt that I'm sorry. So that's useless. Hearing someone say I'm sorry for the 112th time does not do anybody any good. And you don't go to say I'm sorry, you go to fix or repair what was done. So my one big story on this is actually before I got in the program. I think I was probably 16, could have been 17. I had a 1966 Chevy Biscayne 4-door, power drive, 2-speed. And I came out of what's now called the Earl Bell Center. Back then it was called the YMCA. And I had my niece in the car with me, and she couldn't have been more than a few years old. So I decided I'm going to floor this sucker, and I'm going to fishtail out of here and just let everybody know. And so I knew the drive tire was on the left, so if I take a left turn, I get it up there, it's going to squeal for like half a block. And I hit a parked truck. Sideswiping. If you know that year Chevy, the back end's about 4 blocks long. And I kind of heard it, and I looked in the rear, oh man, it was about a 57 Ford step-side pickup. And the front fenders on those things are like these bulbous looking things. And I put a good crease in it. And so, like any good young man did, I kept it on the floor, and I got the hell out of there. And I went home, and when I got home, I was telling my niece, don't you tell anybody we did this. And her eyes got real big. I'll never tell anybody. I don't think she's told anybody to this day. I haven't heard any feedback. I should check. She's only 50 years old now. And checked my car, and those fenders, bumpers back then, you could probably take out a fire hydrant. It wouldn't do any damage. And it had nothing appreciable. I saw no paint. We're good, and I'm pretty sure it was a black truck. So I got clean, sober. I did all this step work, and guess what popped up one day? I hit that guy's 57 Ford pickup. Oh, shit. So I went to, when I wasn't living here then, but when I came back to visit one time, I looked up, what was the body shop everybody used around here? I can't remember now. There was a body shop, and I called them up. Adair's or something. I called them up and I said, if I've got a 57 Chevy or Ford pickup and the front left fender's dented, how much would it cost for you to replace or repair? Because it depends how hard, I said, what's the worst case scenario? Because I can replace it for $150. So I sheepishly went to the guy's house. This was like 7 years later. He still lives there. I knock on the door. I don't think he had a doorbell. And he comes to the door, and I said, some time ago I hit your truck and creased your left front fender, and I think it cost $150 to replace it, so I came here to give you the money. He goes, I figured you'd show up. I said, and he said, well, it didn't cost $150 to replace it. It was only, and I said, I don't care. It's $150 now, and that's when I'm doing it. I didn't do it 7 years ago. And that was one of the biggest senses of relief I've ever had in my life. But I didn't go to apologize. I went to pay for it. I don't think I regretted anything I've done in this program. Even some of the stuff that was kind of untasteful, they have to go to apologize and repair stuff that I thought maybe the other person's more to blame than me. But it always had the same effect on me, is that I got to clear my conscience, and I got to be a lot calmer person. But making amends, don't do them too quick. Talk to 2, 3, 4, 10 people. Write some stuff down, and don't go there to apologize. Go there to correct the mistake. If you can't do that, don't do it. The biggest regret that I do have in the program, I was really a bad person to someone long before I ever got in the program. And I treated him the way some people were treating me. And it was horrible. And I decided the next time I came to Jonesboro, I was going to look this guy up. I found out he lived here, and I was going to go apologize and tell him that the things I did then, I no longer do. And I will not allow people in my presence to do those things. And that was about 6 or 8 months out. In that 6 or 8 months, he passed away. And I totally regret not doing that when I had a chance, at least calling and saying, I'm going to come apologize. I'm going to come try to make that better. So to this day, if I see someone acting the way I acted towards that person, they don't want to be around me. I do not allow that behavior to exist in my presence. Now, if they want to go do it somewhere else, that's fine. It cost me a relationship with one of my niece's husbands. He started doing that behavior around me, and I said, you will never do that in front of me again. He goes, it's my life, I'll do what I want. And I said, yeah, and I'll kick your ass across the room. Don't think I could, he was a lot bigger than me. But I think he heard the anger in my voice, and he backed down. So I had to stand up for something that maybe I wouldn't have stood up for had I never learned that I had been that kind of person. I'm going to give you 2 quick things, and we're out of here. One of the issues that I see in AA is we're not getting out there as much as we used to. And that may just be my perception. You may tell me I'm entirely wrong. We used to go to prisons and hospitals on a regular basis and got the word out there to people that couldn't get to a meeting. And now you call it H&I, hospitals and institutions. I would suggest you make sure that's being done and everybody knows what they're doing when they do it. When you send people to a treatment center and they wing it, they can do more harm than good. There's some real specific guidelines for that stuff. And I've been the enforcer at times. I take a lot of people to groups years ago, and when someone went outside the lines, they go, okay, that's your last time you get to do that, because that's not helping, that's hurting. And there are some really distinct guidelines. You got the 12 steps and 12 traditions, and what's the third one? It's the concepts of service. It's all in there. So that's the one you really have to kind of read, and it takes a while to do some of that stuff. Make sure on a periodic basis, now whether that period is 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, you do a group conscience. You got to find out, and it's really important if you have a group conscience, get the newcomers to come. Find out, is this group doing what we need to do to keep newcomers? Or are there things we're doing that's turning them off or turning them away? And you have to be honest about that. I've been in groups where, I'm not going to get too much into specifics, but where newcomers were seen as interlopers. So newcomers would come and be treated badly, like the way you wouldn't treat a guest. And they're like, I'm not going back to that one. Well, this may be the only one they get to go to. So when the newcomers come in, it's important that you have the procedure set up and everybody's kind of on the same page. If we don't take care of the newcomers, eventually our numbers will dwindle to nothing. I have seen it happen in other places. It doesn't mean you kowtow to them. It doesn't mean you try to make life easy for them. But they have to feel welcome. Okay, let's see if I got anything else. I don't think so. Anybody have any questions? I always like to see if there's any questions. No questions? Yes, sir.
Is your new ship sink?
What's that? Yeah, they're both sunk. I actually have pictures of them sinking. One of them's in Australia. They sunk it to make a reef. And the other one, I think, is in New Zealand, same sort of deal. It is kind of interesting, someplace you lived on for 9 months or whatever. They go down quick. The other thing I'll tell you is, and this is just my perception, the biggest contributor to me feeling more comfortable in this program was working on grief. I had tons of grief that I had never dealt with. And working on grief is like working on your emotions on steroids. Grief is an intensity that I didn't understand. A lot of the work I did was just preparing me so I could handle that level. Now it's called trauma. Back in the old days, we had a really bad conception of what grief was, and that's all changing. Here in Jonesboro, there is a place called Center for Good Grief. It's a freebie, and is it Arkansas Methodist Medical Center? They support it, so it's funded. So if you don't have funds, don't worry, you can go there. But working on grief, that Muriel James I was talking about, that's when I got introduced to it. Her son was named John James. He's since passed away. And I was telling him some of the stuff that was going on with me about my uncle. I lost my uncle when I was young, all this sort of stuff. And he just went straight for the grief. And it was unbelievable how much emotion I had in that. I couldn't stop crying for about an hour. It was just sobbing, sobbing, sobbing. And I didn't want to stop. But that cathartic event is one of those big things in my recovery. So if you think you have any grief, look into it. Center for Good Grief, read some literature. The AA literature is minimal on grief. So you have to seek an outside source. Thank you guys very much for listening.